ready for my trip to Nashville. Got to drive about 3 hours or so, not bad. Going to see my friend Tom. Tom is the conductor of the Wind Symphony at Vanderbilt University. He's a dear old friend of mine from when I was teaching at Ithaca College. I've known Tom for well over 30 years. Incredibly great guy, great musician, and I'm really looking forward to talking to him about what he does. Let's go. This is what traffic looks like driving around Atlanta at 7 o'clock in the morning on a weekday. Trip seems to be going well so far. When I first met Tom, he was a freshman trombone major at Ithaca College, and I was a senior. I then went off to grad school at New England Conservatory and came back, and then I was a professor there. I'm just pulling into the Blair School of Music parking lot. I called Tom a second ago and told him I'd be there in a couple minutes.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
What's up?
So great.
Good to see you.
How you doing?
Great.
How was the trip?
Great trip.
Oh,
Great
fantastic.
trip. Great
I'm so
to be
glad
here.
to have you here.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well,
All right.
let's talk.
Let's do it. Okay, everybody. This is Tom Verrier.
Hi, everybody.
Tom is a very old dear friend of mine. We met back in 1983, so that's,
I
oh
can't do
brother,
the math.
33 years ago.
33 years. Unbelievable.
We were both at Ithaca College, where I was an undergrad and so was Tom. I was a senior when Tom was a freshman. And then, 2 years later,
Because it was my senior year that you came back.
your senior year, I came back to Ithaca where I was teaching. And I needed a place to stay, and Tom, myself, and our other roommate Reggie got a place just off campus. And it was a really, really fascinating year, really great year that we
It was
did.
a great year.
Tom is now, tell him about yourself, Tom.
I'm associate professor of music at Vanderbilt University here at the Blair School of Music, where my primary responsibility is teaching conducting and conducting the Wind Symphony.
And you've been here for how long?
Oh my gosh, this is my 15th year.
So this is my first time that I've had a guest on my program, and I'm really excited about it. And Tom and I talked about it, and he graciously agreed to do this, and we're going to talk about conducting today. So let's dive in. Okay, Tom, I want to talk basics of conducting first, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. So when you're teaching an introduction to conducting course, which I'm sure you do, right?
Yeah,
and you've done in the
teach that
past.
here.
What do you typically do? What are the first things that you cover?
Well, I think the first thing that is important to note, and people that watch conductors realize this immediately, is that no two conductors look the same. A very famous conducting teacher, H. Robert Reynolds, was quoted one time, I heard this quote years ago, he said, the only two things that all great conductors have in common are a clear vision of what they believe the conductor is asking for, a clear vision of what the intent, composer's intent is, and an undying desire to bring that to fruition by whatever means he or she has. So, with that in mind, I think the most important part of a conductor is what happens when he or she is not in rehearsal, the decision making that he or she makes about knowing what the composer is asking for, or believing in what the composer is asking for. Beyond that, of course, with every instrument, there is a set of tools, a set of gestures that are universally accepted, universally known. For me, the beginning conducting class, we don't spend so much time in the decision-making process, because it's my feeling that, by the time the students come to a conducting class here at the Blair School, it's their junior or most of them senior year. So they've been studying their instrument for years. They know how to interpret. I hope. I'm assuming that they know how. They know
That's the idea.
Performance practice, and they have an idea of how to interpret And granted, you're looking at a score, a wind ensemble score has 34, 36 different lines, different parts, but nonetheless, the idea, the background in terms of the decision making that's involved and what to do with what's in front of you. I'm assuming that they're coming in with those tools at a fairly high level, but what they haven't done is transferred that into a means of communication and a means of expression that's different than what it is on their instrument. So in my beginning conducting class, that's the take that we have. We focus a lot on gesture, a lot on nonverbal communication, with the idea that here's now a new set of tools that they can use to communicate that which they believe to be true. For me, I talk about the gesture of a conductor as having three parts. Okay. The actual beat, the actual showing of the beat has a really geeky name. It's called the ictus. Every conductor has an imaginary conducting plane. Now that imaginary conducting plane generally sits where the conductor's center of gravity is. So if I'm conducting something that's heavier music, my center of gravity is lower because I want to look like the music, so the center of gravity is lower. And so my conducting plane, that point at which my count beat 1 ictus occurs, is going to be lower. And then that plane is going to change. But also, you have to realize that that plane is going to change if I'm conducting an orchestra and I'm going to cue the trombones. They're in the back there. So see, my conducting plane also changes relative to those people with whom I'm communicating.
Right.
Because for me, I always imagine that I'm communicating with the ensemble, whether it be an orchestra, a band, or choir, whoever, that I'm communicating with them through an imaginary window. And in that window are the two things that every musician I've ever asked tells me they look at when they look at a conductor. They look at, of course, the hands and the gestures of the hand, but they look at their face as well. And so for me, that conducting window, that imaginary window in which the musicians are watching and through which we're communicating, I always keep my face and my gesture of my hands inside there. So when the plane changes between the eyes of the person I'm conducting, then my conducting plane changes as well. So it's all quite variable in that regard. From the ictus, which is the showing of the beat, you have what they think of as called a rebound. Most people call it rebound. It's the resonance of that, and that can change. Like, for example, if it's staccato, there's not a person, you don't have to know anything about conducting to say.
That's right.
Right. Okay. So for example, sing ta.
Ta.
Okay, so sing with me, sing quarter notes. I'm going to conduct quarter notes, sing ta, and follow more than when, but look at how.
Okay.
Ready?
Ta, 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 ta.
Got it. So now you're looking at more than when. The ictus shows when, right? But it's the way that I leave that ictus. Ictus point is really just a change of direction of anybody's gesture. It's when I leave from that, it's whether I resonate like this or I resonate like this. The rebound shows what happens after the sound. As the other part, the preparation for the next beat, anticipates for you, what the beginning of the sound will be. So within those three parts of the gesture, the preparation, which anticipates how the sound is going to start, the ictus, which indicates the when it's going to start, and then the rebound, which indicates what happens after the sound starts. All of that information, the higher level the musician is, the more they're looking at that information and not just when. Also, for example, if we're conducting in 4/4, and for me, I can do it this way. For me, the conducting pattern, for everybody, 1 is generally down the middle and straight down. That's kind of universal. Now, for me, beat 2 is over here, and most people look for beat 2 over here. So for me, the rebound of 1 is also setting up where I'm going to prep beat 2. So if the preparation for beat 2 is here, then my rebound of 1 goes in the opposite direction of where the beat 2 is. 2. Now beat 3 is going to be over here. That's pretty universal. So then my rebound of 2 is going to come up away from where my preparation of 3 is. So you have 1, 2, 3. Now for me, 4 is up here, but it's slightly to the right of 1. Why? Because I want to approach beat 4 coming off of the rebound of 3. So beat 4 I'm going to approach down and to the left. But I've got to set up a beat 1 preparation which is straight down. So I'm going to rebound up and to the right, which puts me right in the position to come straight back down again. And that's going to be different for every conductor. And no one's right, no one's wrong, because ultimately the only two things that all great conductors have in common is an undying desire to bring whatever they believe to be true to fruition.
Okay, let me ask you then, if you're going to compose, or if you're going to conduct in a triple meter.
It's just like the 4 meter, for me. It's
Yep.
just like the 4 meter, except you take off the second beat. So while you're looking at a 4 pattern as being 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. A 3 pattern is 1. You rebound up this way to set up 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. A 2 pattern is like a 4 pattern without the second and the third beat. So it's just a 1, and then I rebound up here where my beat 4 was in the 4 pattern and come back down to be 1 again. So the most important thing is that, and I think you'll see this pretty universally in just about any conductor, 1 is, when they want to be clear, he or she wants to be clear, 1 is pretty much a straight down pattern in the middle. Even with our university students, once everybody knows how the piece goes, everybody can count to 4.
Sure.
So it's not the job of the conductor to monitor where 4/4 is. And so the more that we know something, the less then, particularly by the time we get to the concert, we've gone through a rehearsal process of 5, 6, 8 hours here at the university. We go through a process of 14 or 15 hours of rehearsal before the concert. By the time we get to the concert, the last piece of information that the musicians are looking for is what is beat 2? Where is beat 2? They know where beat 2 is, and so so you have to realize when you're looking at a concert performance of a conductor, that's the culmination of a rehearsal. I show things differently through the rehearsal process to ensure that people then can take ownership and they're clear about what's going to happen here and there and there.
So what you're saying is that you don't have to subdivide the beat for these people by this time for your players.
Hopefully by the time you get to the concert, but for example, there are many works in the wind ensemble, wind symphony repertoire in the United States in the 21st century is largely rhythmic with a lot of mixed meters and this kind of thing. The way you approach that in rehearsal, many conductors are going to tell you that they believe it that you should always conduct the performance. But for me, the reality is that what the musicians need through the rehearsal process is a clarification of the information that they need to know to do their job when the performance comes.
So you're saying that when you're rehearsing a piece, especially at the beginning with something that's a mixed meter piece, you're going to be doing more subdivision of the beat.
I'm going to be
in the early rehearsals compared to your
Absolutely.
Performance.
Absolutely.
Because you're doing a performance as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And the idea is that my role, I think the best analogy that I can use is one by Fergus McWilliam, who's a hornist in the Berlin Philharmonic and a dear friend of mine and a musical mentor of mine. And and he has, when we've talked about this, equated kind of the role of the conductor through the rehearsal process, kind of like a soccer coach. Okay, the way the soccer coach handles him or herself and works with the players during a practice is not at all the way he or she does it during the game.
Okay, so I know that you've been going to Berlin for the last few summers in this program that you do.
It's actually a program that was this will be our 10th summer coming up. It's a program that we developed. It's actually in the south of France, and it's a program for Vanderbilt students. We bring students there. Our professors, if you will, are a mix of musicians from the Berlin Philharmonic, musicians from France, European musicians, and the idea is for these American students to get a flavor for what it is to live as an artist. So they do a lot of what we call inter-artist activities while they're there, but at the same time they're working with these really wonderful world-class musicians. And
when you're working with people that play in the Berlin Philharmonic, which is one of the greatest orchestras in the world, has been for years. I mean, has been for many years. How does it differ from working with, for example, students when you're working with somebody that's been playing in a professional orchestra for years?
Well, what's really interesting for me, specifically about that orchestra, is what really let's face it, in the 21st century, if you can land a professional orchestra job, you are a really great player.
Right.
Because it is absolutely, so competitive.
Right. You pretty much have to die to lose your spot.
You
if you
do.
play the
And
orchestra.
so, we have an amazing orchestra here in Nashville filled with phenomenal musicians. I mean, there are wonderful orchestras all around the world. In particular, what I have observed in Berlin, which has really influenced me, is the way that they not just play their instruments individually, because they're phenomenal. It's how they make music together, specifically the way that they interact with each other, which makes them really one of these great orchestras, one of the handful of super great orchestras in the world, is the way that these 120 amazing musicians actually interact with each other and the understanding of the communication model between conductor and between musician.
In an orchestra, is the coach the conductor and the concertmaster the quarterback?
That's a good analogy. It's interesting. How many years ago?
For those of you that don't know, the concertmaster is the first violinist.
First violinist, yeah.
And just explain that role with the first violin in orchestras, for example.
In particular, the first violinist is really the quarterback. It's a great analogy. It's the musical leader.
When we say the first violinist, we don't mean the section. We mean literally the first.
Right, and in the role in the violin sections, at each of the sections, the first violin, second violins, violist, cellos, basses, have a principal player, and it's the role of that principal player to unify what the rest of the section is doing.
And they typically will sit on the outside, as far as the violins and the cellists. And the basses.
And they'll sit in the front of the section, and the rest of the section is monitoring. Because one thing you have to also, you'll if you haven't realized it, next time you watch an orchestra, you'll see that all the first violins, their bows move exactly together.
Yes.
That's just not a fluke. That's something that's worked out. Many conductors have their set of bowings that they like.
You will never see a
piece.
professional orchestra ever have a bow in any section going the opposite way.
Right, it's always
Never.
together. Generally, the decision that the conductor generally gets to make. So in many regards, the conductor is the referee more than the coach.
Okay. In a wind ensemble, who plays the role of the concertmaster?
That depends. And it depends on the piece, and it depends on the moment. What makes a group of winds a little bit different and challenging in terms of this group dynamic as opposed to an orchestra is that a couple of things. First, I don't want to forget this point that several years ago, my colleague, who was our orchestra conductor here, Robin Found, and I did 2 residencies in Berlin. We spent quite a number of days with the idea of talking with musicians from the orchestra, because we have several friends who are in the orchestra, and we basically had an all-access pass to rehearsals and to, and we had many beautiful meetings and lunches and dinners, talking with the musicians, basically asking, what is it that you are looking for in a conductor? What is it? What makes a good conductor? Mm-hmm. And of course, we were getting a myriad of different answers, and weeding it down to common denominators. But it was very interesting having a conversation with one of the trombonists who was very polite to me and said, I appreciate talking to you, but I really don't know what I'm going to tell you, because frankly, I never really watched the conductor. Okay, so of course that begged the question, well, what do you watch? And the answer was, I always watch the concertmaster, because the concertmaster is giving me a lot of information.
Yes.
The information that I need directly in the how.
You'll notice any piano concerto that you watch, since usually the pianist is set up right next to the concertmaster, and they will always look to the concertmaster to begin a section. If the piano, for example, is leading a section, then they look at the concertmater, or vice versa, depending on who's going to start off. They do a lot of cueing where they don't even involve the conductor.
What I generally teach to my students, and what I teach when I go and work with young musicians around the world is when you see professional musicians interacting, what you notice immediately is they look at each other as well as the conductor. And so I always work on trying to divide the time evenly. You're going to notice immediately that the wooden players that are sitting in front tend to move a lot more than the brass in back. That's because the brass in back really have a hard time hearing forward. If we
makes sense, yeah.
In an ensemble, when you're in the concert, you're out in the concert hall, you're hearing all the sound coming at you. But you would be amazed if you were in the back row of an orchestra or the back row of a band, how difficult it is to hear what's in front of you. And so the players that are in back of an ensemble tend to unify what they're doing as much with their eyes as they are with their ears, and which is why this trombonist would say to me, I pay attention to the concertmaster. I look at the concertmaster. Maybe I don't listen, I can't hear the concertmaster well, but I can see everything that I need to know to emulate what I'm doing musically.
Okay, let me ask you a sound question here. You have done performed pieces as a conductor and a performer in many different concert hall settings. Mm-hmm. How do the acoustics, how much do the acoustics matter to you? Hugely.
It affects the way the musicians can hear. Hence, it affects the way one conducts. Would I, through the rehearsal process, somehow whether I would verbally raise awareness of that, or through gesture raise awareness of it? Absolutely, because I get the best seat in the house.
Right.
And so back to that analogy of football, the analogy of being a coach and being the referee are really great analogies, because I'm in a position to see who makes a foul. I'm in the position of encouraging more from someone who doesn't realize they can give more, and I'm in the process in the position to say, what, you may feel like that's staccato enough, but what I'm hearing, it's still not staccato enough given the hall. And so, if it's in a performance and you can't stop and talk about it, or it's in a rehearsal and you don't want to stop and talk about it, then you use nonverbal communication with that musician to give feedback. And the other thing which is really interesting about great musicians, through the entire process, musicians look at a conductor. The communication model generally goes like, the musician looks at the conductor gives feedback, the musician plays, the musician looks back again for response, for feedback. More or less, what are you hearing?
Right.
So there's always a look at the conductor twice kind of model, and when you're working with young conductors, they often don't realize that, and so immediately you can see a young conductor, particularly in rehearsal, if a conductor's only conducting the sound and not giving any feedback, it's like conducting to a recording. It's all information one direction of what that person believes to be true, and not a living communication model where I'm showing this and then I'm coming back and saying, yeah, or some kind of communication with that person.
Let's talk about preparing a score. The first time you're seeing a score, what do you look at? How do you read a score with 30 some odd lines with multiple parts?
When I can open a page of the score and I can say, aha, this is what's happening here, and this is the characters of the earlier, or this is the theme earlier, and this is how it's developed here, and how we got to this point, and what this has to do with the ultimate moment of the piece, or the movement. When I have a feeling of that, I feel like I'm ready.
But are there phrases sometimes that you're looking at, for example, that you have to really think about how to subdivide?
Absolutely. For example, you're going to come to rehearsal today. We're doing a piece by my dear friend Frank Ticelli, where it has a lot of mixed meter at the beginning. Mm-hmm. It's got
Explain mixed meter.
Okay. So most music that we know has either a steady 2 subdivisions to the beat, 1 bump, dum 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 dum, or what's actually older is having 3 subdivisions of the beat. There is some music that combines those two. Where you have different divisions of the beat, but it's the subdivisions that is consistent. So if the the subdivision of my beat is dut dut in 2, dut 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 dut. Then I want to have a group of 3 as opposed dut 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 dut. It's the subdivision, the value of the subdivision that's not changing, but it's the larger beat that's changing because some beats have 2 subdivisions in them while others have 3 subdivisions, and that's generally what we talk to as kind of a mixed meter.
It's really been fascinating to watch Tom over the years, knowing him as a freshman music student and then seeing him conducting the Wind Symphony at Vanderbilt. Anyways, that's all for now. Thank you for watching. This is Everything Music. I'm Rick Beato.